Hello and welcome to this tutorial. What I'm hoping to cover with you today is an extremely simple approach to creating a Telegram bot. It's going to be very simple. You won't need any programming knowledge to be able to do it, but it will rely on some Linux utilities that you might be unfamiliar with. So you'll be learning a little bit of that as you go. There'll be a minor amount of programming when we start doing some shell scripting, but nothing that you would normally associate with creating bots, such as Node.js or Python, for example. And just to give you a very small taste of what it is we're going to be trying to build, I've got an example here from, we've got the Telegram documentation, which we'll be looking at later. But over here, you can see I created this thing called a notify Bates bot. And what this does is it reads the electricity reading from a publicly available API provided by my electricity provider. Now, we won't be using this in the tutorial because your electricity provider might not have such a API endpoint that you can hit, but we'll use a readily available API endpoint to simulate this kind of thing. So we won't be getting an electricity reading. We're going to be generating a random user and having that posted to us through our Telegram bot. Now you might be wondering, what's this useful for? Well, in the case of this electricity reader that I've made, the electricity company that I'm with do not have an app. So I can't receive push notifications to my phone whenever I get a daily update on my electricity usage, which I'd like to monitor. So by hooking into an API that they provided, I was able to give myself that push notification just with some very simple tools I'm going to show you today. Okay, so the first tool we're going to get to know today is curl. Now, you probably have this installed on your system, but if you don't, you'll be able to download it very simply. Because I'm on an Ubuntu Linux distribution, I'll be using the apt package manager. If you're on a different flavor of Linux, then you will probably already know the different commands that you'll need. If not, you can find them reasonably easily. If you're with Arch Linux, for example, or Manjaro, then you might be using Pacman as your package manager. If you are using one of the other ones, like CentOS, I think uses Yum. Whatever it is, you'll have equivalents. So when you see me type things like apt-get, there's an equivalent that you might need if you're not using Ubuntu. If you're using the WSL, the Windows Linux subsystem, then I believe that ships with Ubuntu, so you'll be able to use the same commands that I'm using today. Anyway, if you don't have curl already installed, you should just be able to just very simply install it with sudo apt install curl, and you will need your password. And I already have it installed. It's already at the latest version, so I'd be able to use it. So just to give you an example of what curl does, if you haven't seen it before, it's a very simple tool that is used to essentially query a URL and return whatever would normally get returned. Much the same as a browser would, but obviously this is entirely text-based. So if we use example.com as our first example, you can see when I curl that web address, I get the HTML for the web page, very simply. But we don't want to work with raw HTML. We want an API endpoint, which is going to return JSON to us, because I'm a web developer by trade. I work with React all day. So JSON is the thing I'm more comfortable working with. So what we are going to be using today for our simple tutorial is an API called random user. And you'll see when I curl this API endpoint, I get a random user generated by their API. Now, again, because I prefer to work with JSON, this is JSON, as you'll probably recognize, but it's actually just a string. So there's another utility I'm going to use to parse this more usefully as JSON. If you know how to use grep, which is a way of using pattern matching to search through strings of text or files of text, then you'll be familiar with the general idea of extracting a minimum amount of data from a larger file. But with JSON, because of the way it's structured, there's actually a really nice Linux utility called JQ, which works very similarly to grep, but is designed specifically for JSON. Now, if you don't have JQ installed, you can probably already imagine where this is going. You simply install JQ. Simply is one of those words, by the way, that I have to remove from my vocabulary. I apologize. But we can install it if we haven't already done so. I do have it installed, so no problem. Just to give you a quick example of what JQ is able to do, if we were to, for example, echo, so I can echo foobar and you'll get the string foobar. But if I were to pipe this, so if you're unfamiliar with the Linux terminal, the pipe operator here that we have simply takes the input, or rather the output from one command and sends it straight along to another command, like a pipe. So we can pipe the output of echo foobar to JQ. And JQ has a number of different filters and things that you can use. The most naive filter you have is a simple dot, and that just translates whatever you've passed it into JSON, which is easier to read. So if I just show you that, now we can see we have our JQ being returning the more useful JSON that we can play with. We can do other things with this. For example, we could get a particular property off of our JSON object and then return its value as well. So, you know, you'll get some idea of how we can play with this as we explore it a bit further. So putting these two things together, we know we've got our random user API, and we know we've got this tool called JQ, which helps us parse JSON data. So what we're going to do here is put those two things together. So you can already probably figure out what this is going to do. We're going to take the same kind of random user data that we received a few minutes ago, and we'll pipe that to JQ. We'll use the naive filter just so it formats it as JSON for us. And there we have a very large payload, considering this is such a simple thing. Now you would have noticed as we curled, we got this little download meter telling us how many bytes were being downloaded and how long it was going to take. Now for the purposes of our script, we don't need that output, and it's going to, you know, just make a little bit of mess in our terminal. So what we can actually do is, with the same curl command that we had before, we can silence it with the S flag. And if I do that, you'll see it doesn't show me that download bar. But this is a lot of information, and I don't want to use all of this information for the sake of the tutorial. So what we're going to do is, instead of just using JQ with the dot for the naive filter, we're going to just have a look at our data that we've been given and think about how we can manipulate this to return only the little bit that we want. So I think what I want to return is just this name portion. Now, if you remember from the foobar example I had earlier, you may be thinking that we just do something like this, okay? Because we've got the name here. But if we do name, it comes back as null. Now, why does it do that? Those of you that are used to working with JSON will probably have recognized that actually the only property that is accessible to us at this level is results. So let's have a play with that first. Wonderful. There we go. So there we've got our results. And again, we're going to look for some little clues here. We can see we've got an array that we've been passed. So if you are used to working with arrays, you'll probably know that you want the 0 index on that array. So there you go. We've got our 0 index. And now we've got our first thing that's available, the kind of topmost level. Oh, I've gone too far. The topmost level now is gender, name, location, all of those good things. So what we can just do here is pass the name off of that, and we get a lovely name that's been provided for us. And we'll use this for the purposes of our bot. So if I just do some other random ones, you can see that we get a new one every time. And I'll just show you one other quick trick with JQ. If you're taking the first element off of an array, you actually don't need to pass it the 0 at all. This syntax is exactly the same. So there we go. There we've got our automated, or not automated yet, but our randomly generated users. Now, one of the things we're going to need to do to enable our script to be run automatically is turn it into a script. Now, this is actually a very small thing that we're doing, so it doesn't really need to be a script. We could just pass the whole thing along to a cron job and it would be fine. But it's good practice to get into learning how to make these scripts from scratch, because we might be doing more complicated things down the track. So the first thing I'll do is I'll just open up Vim to make a new example. So let's sudo vim, and we'll call it random bot. So this opens up our random bot, and as with any bash script that we might write, or a shell script that we might write, we'll start with the hashbang, and we'll just say bin and sh to identify this as a shell script. Now all we really need to do for our first command that we're going to put into our script is just exactly what we wrote in the terminal. The beautiful thing about shell scripting is it's essentially just imperative programming, where you just put all of the commands in as you would run them normally, and it will do them one by one unaided. So it's a really nice, gentle introduction to programming. That's why they call it scripting. So we are just going to repeat what we had earlier. So just double check this. So we're curling, we're silencing the output. We're https randomuser.me/API JQ results name blah blah blah. Okay, so we will just quickly, we just save that, and then we should see that we have what do we call this? Random bot. So let's just do random. Yeah, so we've got our random bot. Now what we're going to need to do here, let's just quickly you can see here when I list it with the long flag, we can see that it's owned by root because I opened it with sudo, which I probably shouldn't have done. And in fact, we're just going to go and clean that up real quick because we don't want it to be owned by root. So we will say, I didn't actually intend to do this, but it's fine. So we're going to change the owner, so chown, random bot. No, we're going to chown Jackson, and we're going to say random bot is not, oh yeah, sudo. Okay, and then we'll just quickly, all right, so now it's owned by me, that's fine. So what we're going to do here is, you'll notice in the file read write permissions information we have here, this final value determines whether or not it's an executable. And obviously, because this is a shell script, we would like it to be executable, but it's not currently. So similar to the chown command that we just used, we can also have chmod, and you can use +x, and then you just pass it the name of the thing that we've just made. And then if I do the ls once again, you'll notice this time it's now executable. It's actually executable across the board. So any user that has access to this file can execute it, which, you know, for our purposes is fine. Then all we need to do is just test whether or not it works. Now, to run a shell command from the command line, if it hasn't been added to your path there, or to a bin folder, a binary folder, then it needs to be run with a dot preceding it. So we just have dot and then random bot shush, and we'll give it a second, and it works. So we now know that our script can be run. If I wanted to, I could set a cron job to run this once a day, and it would just, randomly print to standard out a random user, but that's not particularly useful to us. The second thing we would like to do, obviously, is hook this up to a Telegram bot. So let's just have a quick look at the documentation to see what the steps are we need to take to do that. Okay, so you can see here I am at core.telegram.org/API. You can get this just by going to the Telegram website and finding the API section. And it tells us it offers two types of API endpoint, but the one we're going to use is the bot API. The reason we're doing this is because we want it to essentially be able to send messages to our phones. Now, the documentation for this is very straightforward, so it's worth checking out very quickly. I'm not going to read it all to you, but just to show you where it is. It gives you an idea of some of the things that you can do and how they work. But the important thing here is, how do I create a bot? And they tell us that they have a bot for it called the bot father. So here we have the bot father over here. And pretty straightforward. All we need to do is visit the bot father and ask him to create a new bot for us. So I'm just going to open up my Telegram client, and you can see I have the bot father already. If you haven't got him, you can simply add him. If you've used Telegram before, you will figure out how to add him. If not, you can find him in the documentation. And for the sake of creating our new bot, we need to make a new bot. So we are told up here, where are we? The things that he can do, that to create a new bot, we just do /new bot. So this bot is driven by / commands. Ours will not be so fancy. And then it's going to step us through a process that it's going to ask us some questions just to fill out the details. So it says, all right, a new bot, what are we going to call it? So let's call him random user. So we called him random user bot. Good. Now let's choose a username for your bot. It must end in bot, for example, Tetris bot or Tetris_bot. So let's just see if we can do random user bot. It may already have been taken. We'll find out. Already taken. So, okay, that was harder than it needed to be. Random user bot hasn't been taken. So now I've taken it. So it's going to give us a token. So I'm just going to pull that. Now it says here, keep your token secure, store it safely. Anybody who has this token can use it to control the bot. Now, obviously I am publishing this on YouTube, so I'm going to have to find a way to kill this bot so that you can't steal it, which I don't mind doing because this is a throwaway bot, but you get the idea. This is a secret. You need to keep it secret. You treat your API keys with the same way you would a password, just as a fair warning. So we're going to copy our selected text. I'm just going to go back and add this to my shell script as a variable. This is going to be a useful thing for us to have later. Now, to activate our bot for our purposes, we also need to interact with it. So one of the safety features is random bots can't just start attacking you on Telegram. Rather, you have to initiate the conversation with them. This will also give us a chat ID that we can then speak into with our particular, whatever we want to do. So the first thing we'll do is we're just going to click on our random user bot and we can just say start. And what this does is it now starts a conversation between myself and that bot. Now, once we've done that and we've initiated the first contact with our bot, it's a good idea just to go back and check the bot API manual, because in there we're going to find the next instruction that we need. So the API documentation we have here first starts off with some recent changes, and then as you go a bit further down, it gives you the other methods that are available to us. Now, the method that we are going to use is one called get updates. So I'm just going to quickly find that for you. Here we go, get updates. Now, there are a lot of client libraries and things you can use. There's no doubt Node.js, Python libraries. But as I said, we're just going to be using curl and the basic kind of HTTP REST API that we can send that way. So the only thing we really need to know here is the get updates command to begin with. This is just a one-off command that we're going to run just to get our chat ID. So using curl, we're just going to start off by hitting the Telegram API endpoint. So it starts off with https //api.telegram.org/bot, and then we need our token. Now I did copy my token elsewhere, so let me just go grab that. Actually, I'm going to need to copy that from here. So this was my token, and then at the end of the token, so let's just bot and then our token. There's no space or hash or dash or anything, and then get updates, and we should. Okay, we got nothing. So what we'll need to do just really quickly is send a message to our bot. So this is just to give it an update that we can read. So I'm just sending hello to my bot, but my bot doesn't know anything. We'll just run that again. And there you go. We've got our information here. So we have a message from my user ID, my name, blah, blah, blah. And what we have here is our chat ID. And our chat ID is the next piece of information we need. Okay, so I found this just by going to chat ID like this. And we're just going to pull that ID and copy it. And we're going to add that to the shell script that we are in the middle of writing. So we'll just say vim random. And here we will say chat ID is this. And while I'm at it, I'm just going to add the URL for the next endpoint we need to hit. So you can see what I've done here. I'm creating a URL that I'm going to use for our final piece of the puzzle, which is to send the message. And we're going to send it to the send message API endpoint. And you'll notice what I did here was instead of writing out the weird URL that I did previously with the token in there, because we've set the token as a variable up here, our shell script can just pull that token straight off and interpolate it in the string on the fly. So this is a really nice little feature of shell scripting. If you've used JavaScript or essentially any other programming language, you'll know that string interpolation, can be done like this. But this is just a nice, clean way of doing it with Bash. So this is going to be an API endpoint that we hit. And we can test that. So let's just, actually, we won't take it. We'll just do it here. So we've got our message is going to be this. So let's just make that our message. And so we're going to send that. Now, in order to pass a command and write it to a variable, we actually just do this. So we passed the command that we already had previously, so our curl command that gets the random user. And then the final thing we're going to need our shell script to do is actually send a post request to the Telegram API endpoint that takes the random user that we're going to generate for our message variable and sends that along so it gets sent to our Telegram client. So again, this is just using curl. But this is curl with a few extra tricks up its sleeve. So we're going to silence the output like we did before. We're also going to discard the output that we receive. we don't actually need to do anything with it once we've sent it. We don't need it to be sent to standard out. So what we'll do is we'll write it to an output file, but we're going to use this magical file that exists in Linux systems called devnull. And what this is essentially a black hole that we can send our information into, and it just goes away. It's essentially just like throwing it straight in the trash. Then we're going to pass it a couple of items of data. So with a curl request, you can attach data to the request, like you would with form inputs, for example, if you were sending it through a web interface. So we use the D flag. We've got our chat ID is pretty simply going to be the chat ID that we got earlier, which we've created as a variable at the top of the file. We have another piece of data that we're going to send, which is our the body, if you like, the body of the message. So the name for that is text, and we're just going to say today's alias, and then we're going to send it the message. So we just do message like this. So what this will do, again, it's using the string interpolation. It's going to take the message from our curl output up here, and it's going to write a message that says today's alias and then the message. So we, pretending we're a spy or something. It's going to send us a random user name that we have to use every day. And then the final thing we need to do is, because it's a post request, we need to set the method. So the X flag sets a method, and the method we are sending is a post. So if you're aware of REST APIs, the usual requests that you'll use will either be get or post. Sometimes use patch, put, delete, that kind of thing, but here we've just got post. And the final thing obviously is the URL that we're sending it to. And we wrote this up here. So this is going to send a post request to this send message API endpoint. Now this is actually everything we need to have it work. So let's just try this out, see if it does actually work. So I've saved my work, and I'm just gonna, let's open these up in side by side. Just get rid of me out of the way so we can see what we've got here. So we've got our random user bot. Now, if we run our random user bot again, what we're expecting this to do is hit the API endpoint and then send it to our Telegram bot. And it should only take a couple of seconds, if that. Well, hey, worked first time. So you can see as I ran it, we now have today's alias is Mr. Lucas Moya. So there we go. That's the basics of this. Now let's just say we wanted to make it a little bit more interesting. We can actually add this as a cron job to your Linux system. So let's say, for example, you have something like my electricity reader where I want it to send me a message every day at 8 a.m. So if you look here, you'll see 8 a.m., 8 a.m., 8 a.m. I've got a script running on my home server, which is always on, and that just simply does the same sort of thing that we're looking at here, but it just sends an API request to my electricity provider at 8 a.m. on the dot and texts it to me through Telegram. So if we wanted to do the same thing, we can use the cron tab that's built into Linux as well. So we'll just say cron tab E for edit. Now, if you don't have a cron tab, this command will create one for you. And if you do have one, then you'll be appending to this. So I'll just go to the bottom, and you can see I've got nothing here, but we've got a quick example of what how this works essentially. So we've got essentially we can have 5 values. So this one, for example, the star means every, essentially. So you've got every minute of every hour, every day of the month, every day of the week, and then it runs a command. Let's just say we wanted it to run every day at 8 o'clock. So we could have like this and this. So this is saying on the 0 minute of every 8 o'clock of every 8th hour, every day of the week of the month, then it's going to run a particular command. So we're just going to pass it our random, what was it, random? I've already forgotten the name of it. Let's just get out of here for a second. What was it called? Random bot. Okay. Let's just go here, say random. So what this will do is run the random bot on the schedule. Now I'll just show you one tool that I really like. So we have this nice tool here called Cron Tab Guru. If you're not sure what a cron entry does, you can just type it in and it will tell you. So essentially at 8 AM every day, it will run our task and it tells us when the next time that's going to run. That'll be tomorrow, 28th of February at 8 AM. So if we just go back to our Cron tab, we can confirm that that's what that's going to do. We could, change these values however you like. You can use Cron Tab Guru to see how that works. And that's it. That's essentially all we are going to look at today. Just to recap, because there was a lot there, we looked at curl, JQ for parsing our JSON. We also looked at changing the owner of the file because I accidentally created the random bot with sudo, which meant it was going to be owned by the root user and I wanted it owned by the user of the account. We used chmod or chmod, change mode, to make it an executable. We then curled the API endpoint. We what else did we do? Then we wrote it to we created a Telegram bot user. We interacted with it. We got the updates, and then we sent to that endpoint. And then finally, we created a cron tab entry for it, so it will run every day at 8 AM. And that's it. That's actually how you can make a very straightforward bot. This can be scheduled to run. If you wanted to check stock prices or something on it, by the minute or by the hour or by the day or whatever, you could do that with this type of bot. If you simply just wanted to text yourself a random feel-good message, you could do that, automating it, set it and forget it. Once you start to think about the possibilities of automating these things, really you can come up with lots of fun projects. So if you do come up with a fun project, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if this has been useful to you, or you'd like to hear more information about any of the things we've talked about today, I'd love to go into more detail. So just let me know what you'd like to know next. Anyway, this has been a long one, so thanks for watching.